what you'd have to do is, you'd have to get into power. And then what you'd have to do is, of course, a lot of the damage is done because the money's been borrowed now. And the money's been paid over to all these people. So a lot of the damage has already been done. We can't undo the damage. But if I were in power, if I had been in power, well, first of all, it would not have arisen. The situation would not have arisen. We would not be in the situation we're in today. It would not have arisen, the situation. Because I would have introduced legislation in Dublin to prevent it arising. Dead simple. Dead simple. But as I told you about these people that run our society, these politicians, they're total and utter incompetence. They don't know their arse from their elbow. This is not a complicated matter. We live in a small, insular republic on the edge of Western Europe. That's where we live. It's a simple matter. There's less than 5 million people here. We produce about 5 times what food we need on the land. We've sold our seas. Well, we've given our seas because, of course, we're the only island nation in the world not interested in fish. Anyway, you could go on. Listen, you could go on. You could go on about the Irish predicament. If they give us the wheel, if they reinvented the wheel and give it to us, we'd make it square. Paddy's would make it square. I tell you, we're something else. We're something else. We're facing the biggest economic crisis imaginable. And people are getting it up for me and asking me, what would I do? Well, the first thing you do is, what you would do in all businesses, if Company A owns Company B money, and Company A is not able to pay Company B the money that it owns, and there's a contract drawn up, it has to be a contract, it has to be a bit of paper. If it's word of mouth, different thing altogether. But when it's a physical contract, and it's legitimate, and it's recognised and stamped by both parties, signed off on, it has legitimacy. If Company A can't pay Company B, the Company B takes it to the courts and says, this Company A is delinquent. Right? It's not paying off its contract here. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. And I want it wound up. And they'll put it in the administration or receivership. The court will. Because the court recognises the contract. If it's a legitimate contract. Okay. And what happens? So that's what happens in the real world. So that's what I would have done with the banks. The banks came to me and said, no. I said, you borrowed the money. You're not able to pay the money back. Tough titty. You're now wound up. Then I would have went to people that they owed the money to and said, you loaned them the money. That's your problem with these people now. What I suggest you do is you go to the Irish courts and get them wound up, because if you don't, we're going to wind them up anyway, and we're going to sell their, we're going to do an asset stripping operation, and we're going to give you, when we sell their assets, we're going to give you the proceeds from those assets. And we're going to start up new banks tomorrow morning. And I would have went to the European Bank and said, the European Central Bank and said, this is the way it's gone down, because we're not putting our country into penury for anybody. But then you see, I'd represent other class interests than what Fianna Fáil would represent. So that's the dilemma that you're in. I don't represent their class interests. They represent corporate interests and elitist interests. I don't. I told you who I represent. I represent working class interests and middle class interests. End of story. So that's the situation. But then what happens is, you see, you introduce the real world. Yeah, that's the real world of politics you enter. Because you start playing a big boys game then. And then all of a sudden, funny things start happening to your state. Like there could be a little thing called a coup d'etat. Or your Prime Minister could get assassinated. Or one of the planes that he's travelling in with his cabinet ministers could fall out of the sky mysteriously. So, if you're going to go down that route, you've got to go down that route fully. So that means employing politics then. And that's a different ball game. I don't want to talk about that. You have to, in order to do all this, you need the sovereignty. The sovereignty is imbued in the will of the people. The people loan that will, they loan their will to whoever's in power for 4 or 5 years Unfortunately for the Irish people, to a large extent, it's their own fault. They imbued and gave sovereignty to a muppet called Bertie Ahern. That is what they did, and they're paying a big price for it. Sorry about that, but that's the reality.